Hello, my name is Mitch Sanders. I'm chair of the Communications Committee for the Wound Healing Society. It is my pleasure to have Vincent Maida here today to discuss his paper in wound repair and regeneration. Vincent is an associate professor at the University of Toronto, Canada. He's internationally recognized as an expert in palliative medicine and wound management. He has more than 2 decades of clinical experience in cannabinoid therapies across the spectrum of healthcare. He's an active researcher and original inventor of topical cannabis-based medicines, and I think he's also CEO of a company called, what is it, Vincent?
Vincent, yes.
Okay, therapeutics, and has involved in an intellectual property incubator. So, Vincent, welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Mitch. It's a pleasure. Yeah, my name is Vincent Maida, and I'm from Toronto, Canada. Wonderful. And thanks for the opportunity to chat today.
You're welcome. And the paper we're going to discuss today, it's more of a biomedical hypothesis, less pain, more gain, managing wound-related pain with cannabis-based medicines. Vince, I thought it was my only complaint about your paper was too short, but it was a great introduction to the topic. And I think for those people that don't know, there are a number of drugs that are coming on the market or on the market now for pain management, for treating childhood epilepsy, for helping AIDS patients, for palliative care, for better reducing nausea and all the other things that are associated with AIDS, and also for cancer patients as well. Are there any other recent drug indications that you know of that I missed?
Well, as you said, the ones that are FDA and Health Canada approved pertain to pain management, systemic pain management for cancer patients, and particularly cancer patients, and also the indication for HIV/AIDS, anorexia, cachexia. And the most recent one, of course, is Epidiolex, which is a CBD concentrated CBD preparation to treat intractable seizure disorders in children like Dravet's and Lennox-Gastaut. But there's more on the way, and what I'm working on will eventually evolve into a family of drugs and pharmaceuticals and associated technologies to help with integument and wound management. And that's what I'm particularly zeroing in on. This all stems from my decades of experience using cannabis-based therapies in a variety of healthcare scenarios. I'm a palliative medicine specialist. I also have done a master's degree in wound management. So my experience in palliative medicine has led me to become an expert both in cannabis and in wound management. And what I'm working on is basically has come about as a combination of all of those elements to create the formulations that I've created. The endocannabinoid system is the scientific validation for what I'm working on. Every part of the body has elements of the endocannabinoid system. And of course, the integument and skin being the biggest and heaviest organ in the body. And of course, just a little caveat, when I say integument, I mean both the outside skin and the inside skin, so mucous membranes and cutaneous membranes, is the biggest and heaviest organ in the body. And therefore, it stands to reason that there's great potential for modulation of the endocannabinoid system to help treat integument and wound conditions, which remain areas of huge unmet need in global healthcare.
Sure. So let's start out with sorry about the feedback. Let's start out with the standard of care in chronic wounds for pain management.
I'm sorry, so I didn't catch.
Sorry, can we talk about the standard? What is the current standard of care for pain management and wound care?
So there's not much. It's being managed, as I've outlined in my article, in a very unsatisfactory manner with a preponderance or a tendency to use opioids. And opioids and other adjuvants, and really opioids you need some level of opioid to treat any type of pain condition. I'm not for a moment suggesting that we're going to be able to get rid of opioids altogether, but the point I want to emphasize is that we're using too much in the way of opioids. And opioids have many deleterious effects on the wound itself. In fact, in my paper, I reference a paper also published in Wound Repair and Regeneration looking at the negative effects on wound healing that opioids have, systemic opioids. So obviously, we need to look at different ways of treating pain. And our current standard of care is not working for patients with wound pain. Patients with wound pain are suffering intolerably. And not only are they suffering intolerably, but the fact that when they have pain, it inhibits wound healing both directly and indirectly as well. All of the other adjuvants similarly are not effective. They have a high burden and propensity to side effects and drug-drug interactions. And so I think the time has come to take a refreshed look at this big problem. It's a major public health problem, wounds in general, but wound-related pain specifically. And given the dominance of the endocannabinoid system within integument and skin, it stands to reason that there's great opportunity to improve this unsatisfactory status quo using cannabis-based medicines in a variety of ways, in combinations, as I've proposed, using both systemic cannabinoids, topical cannabinoids, and also inhalational cannabinoids, together with lower dose of existing drugs like opioids.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the entourage effect and the difference between kind of baseline pain and breakthrough pain?
Right, so it's actually, let's talk about the different types of pain that patients experience. And this is really, Mitch, at the heart of the problem. This is why we have such poor outcomes in our attempts to relieve wound-related pain, is because clinicians aren't asking the patient about the characteristics of their pain. That's why at the front end of my paper, I made the decision to really hone down and talk about the taxonomy of terms in relation to wound-related pain. Wound pain is not all alike. Or any type of pain is not. You need to classify the different elements of the pain. So patients with any type of painful condition usually report two main types of pain. There's a baseline pain, and then there's episodic exacerbations of pain. We call the latter breakthrough pain. And this is classic for particularly wound patients. If you sit down and talk to a patient with a wound, and you ask qualifying questions, they will tell you that there's ongoing pain that they have during the day, and then there may be pain when the visiting nurse comes to change their dressing. That would be an example of a breakthrough pain. Or they might just get breakthrough pain, which is spontaneous and unprovoked during the rest of the day. So you need to target the type of pain that the patient is experiencing with the agent that A is going to work, B is not going to give them side effects and put them at risk of other issues, and C, that matches that kinetically and pharmacodynamically matches the profile of the pain. Ultimately, our goal is to prevent pain. No matter what type of pain a patient has, our ultimate goal is to be proactive and preemptive. Because the moment a patient has pain, a patient is suffering. A patient is losing ground. A patient is not enjoying their life, etc. So ultimately, in a perfect world, what we want to do is we want to prevent pain. So in order to prevent pain, you need to have a constant level of any given analgesic in your bloodstream so that you're creating, metaphorically, let's say, a ceiling of pain control so that, as the pain is trying to break through, the ceiling of pain control, namely the baseline level of drug in the bloodstream, is above the pain that's trying to pierce it. But even with an adequate ceiling of pain control through baseline medications, a pathologic process is still capable of breaking through. And when that happens, you need to address that with the right breakthrough medication, something that's going to work quickly, not something that's going to work in 20 minutes, because that breakthrough episode may be fleeting. It may be less than a minute in duration. So you therefore need to give something that's going to work very promptly.
So a topical spray or something that's going to be right on the wound.
Yeah, so a patient could literally take off the dressing, apply a little more of a topical cannabinoid and relieve the pain. And also, a at the same time, if they have access to it, they could be vaporizing dry cannabis flower. Or in the future, there's a number of companies in the world that are working on spray forms, aerosol forms that they can spray onto their tongue for those breakthrough episodes so that they get relief within less than a minute, not like taking a dose of, say, 10 milligrams of morphine sulfate and it's going to start to work in 20 minutes. Meanwhile, that patient is suffering all that time.
Have you done any preclinical studies to demonstrate that cannabinoids do not affect wound healing per se? Or is there any data out there? I haven't.
So I personally have not done those preclinical studies, but there's ample, and I mean ample, preclinical data looking at the positive effects of how the various molecular families from the cannabis plant promote wound healing directly. And hence, that's where, excuse me, COVID cough. Sorry about that. Hence, that's what brought me to create my intellectual property. Is I did a meta-synthesis of all of the available preclinical data during my master's program many years ago. And that's what led me to understand the potential for all of the main families of molecules within the cannabis plant. Each one individually has wound healing promotion. And therefore my theory has been, when you combine all of those families, you combine the cannabinoids plus the terpenes plus the flavonoids, you can get a potentiated effect, a so-called entourage effect.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I'm seeing in my phase 1 trial. I've completed a phase 1 trial. I've already published 3 papers on various cohorts from my clinical trial. I have 2 other cohorts that I'm studying. One is venous leg ulcers and one is autoimmune ulcers. And my results have been very impressive. And above all, there's been no negative sequelae or side effects or adverse reactions from my topical treatments.
Right. So what I was thinking, for venous insufficiency and venous leg ulcers, oral treatments may not be sufficient, and so topical is probably the way to go, right?
Right. And also, Mitch, to your point, you bring up a very good point about systemic drugs for venous leg ulcers. And I'll share with you that last evening I submitted my paper for publication to another journal, actually, not Wound Repair and Regeneration, but another journal. And I did within this paper, it's quite a large paper, I looked at all of the other adjuvant treatments available for venous leg ulcers so that I can compare my data with my topical cannabis-based medicines as an adjuvant, together with compression therapy, how it performed against many of the other treatments that have been used, like negative pressure wound therapy, the various bioengineered skin substitutes, the silvers, the MMP modulators, etc., etc. We did a thorough scan. We also looked at the oral medications, one being Trentol, which is pentoxifylline, and the other is the phlebotonic medications. And although there's some positive trends showing with both of those agents, they have a propensity for side effects, and specifically Trentol, which has the most robust wound healing promotion results and indicators. It is fraught with side effects, GI side effects, and also you can't give Trentol, or shouldn't give Trentol, to patients who are on blood thinners, whether they're on the NOAC agents like Eliquis and so on, or the old-fashioned Coumadins. There's a risk that you can cause hemorrhagic complications. So a topical would be preferable because you want to avoid systemic side effects and drug-drug interactions.
And is this going to be is this an IND or is this a 505b2? There's enough drugs that are coming on the market that you could probably go 505b2. Is that right?
I have to confess, Mitch, I'm not familiar with those acronyms. So, a 505?
A 505b2 is a drug pathway which you use current drugs on the market and their pharmacokinetics to get approval in a much faster way than an IND, in, a new drug.
Okay.
So it's a much shorter pathway with a lot less clinical. Instead of doing a phase 1 and a phase 2 and a phase 3, you probably can do a phase 1 and a phase 2 and have enough data using other people's pharmacokinetics to get drug approval. Now, the challenge with a drug with cannabis in it, it's not just regulated by the FDA, it's going to be regulated by the DEA, right? And so some companies are having more challenges once they've gotten approval, getting the DEA to okay the approval or the use of their drug because it's a controlled substance.
Yes. Well, at the moment, I'm not at that point yet. I'll tell you where I'm at the moment, Mitch. I'm seeking a biotech or biopharm company to acquire my intellectual property and then retain me as a clinical global scientist to help move this new paradigm forward. So I'm not really at the point of, as you can see, I'm not experienced in your lingo.
I actually have a private equity firm that was very interested in doing something in wound care, and they ended up not doing a deal. I was doing due diligence on a deal for them, and but there are private equity folks that are looking for the next opportunity in advanced wound care. So that could be an exciting time.
This is it.
No, that's wonderful. I'll what I can do is I'll reach out to them for you and see if I can set up a meeting for you and see if we can have a discussion about this. Obviously, it's important. Obviously, I had a son who had some epileptic-like seizures as a kid,
yep.
And without the cannabis, the seizures wouldn't stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm a firm believer that for wound care, this really has promise. But there are some challenges ahead, and you're going to need a bag of money to get this done. It's probably it's probably $5 million to get through 505(b)(2) and have a commercial ready product. The good news is it's not a lot of money, but it's still a bit of money,
I funded all of this this initial stage all on my own. And that's why I still retain full title on the entire portfolio. And my portfolio has the potential to create a family of drugs, both over-the-counter and RX grade. And there's also embodied within my intellectual property the opportunity to use additional technologies, which I can't really share any further details without an NDA, but I believe that this is the next... it's a new paradigm, basically. It's a new way. It actually addresses pathophysiology. So I'll tell you a story, Mitch. I did my master's degree. I'm an old guy, by the way.
You're very kind.
I've been in practice 39 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I've seen everything in healthcare. Okay? Everything. I've had a very rich and I think I've had a pretty decent career. I've been very lucky. I've been very blessed, and I've seen everything in healthcare, from emergency to surgery to ICU to everything, from A to Z, basically. And what stimulated me down this path is realizing that the one domain within healthcare, which I believe has the worst outcome measures, is wound management, integument and wound. Integument and wound has led to many other additional crises, as I believe I've mentioned in my paper. All of our bacterial superbugs in the world come from integument and wound. Why? Because everyone's using excessive antibiotics for wounds that don't need antibiotics. All of the superbugs, MRSA, VRE, you name it, they all come from integument and wound. Because everyone's using opioids for wounds, it stands to reason that it's a major contributor to our opioid crisis. My paradigm is all about getting rid of those negative trends that have been occurring in our world because nobody has challenged the status quo. I'm all about challenging the status quo. Now, you want to hear something funny? I did my master's degree with one of the creators of the wound bed prep paradigm. I never liked the wound bed prep paradigm.
Is this Gary Sabal, or who is this? Yes, yeah. I've been around the block a long time. I know everyone.
When I read it
Nerds
for the
and
first time,
stones. No, I know it very well.
It's nonsense. It doesn't do anything. And furthermore, here's the proof that it needs to go the wayside. It needs to go the way of the dodo bird. Why? Because in 25 years of wound bed prep, how many level 1A evidence-based recommendations have come out of the wound world? 0. What does that tell you? Wound bed prep needs to go into the garbage can.
I'm not quite ready for that yet. But what I can say is diagnostics are changing the game. And so there's a lot of new diagnostics that are out there, and the FDA's now recognizing new primary endpoints and not just healing. So infection and pain and all these other things that are just as important as healing are finally being recognized as primary endpoints by the FDA, which I think is amazing. So
absolutely, yeah. But also my paradigm addresses underlying pathophysiology, because more research is showing that what's happening in a wound is a state of dysregulated endocannabinoid signaling. And so that's, more and more we're learning about the dominance of that pathophysiologic process within a wound. And, what I'm finding, what I'm publishing is my theory. My theory is the reason why my preparations and methodology works. Number one, it abates the hyperinflammatory state in a chronic wound. So that's step number one. Along that way, while it's relieving the inflammation, it's also relieving pain. Because as you dampen down the inflammation, you dampen down the pain.
Sure.
Okay.
Reducing MMPs, H&E. I understand.
Yeah. So that's step number one. Step number two, cannabinoids, my preparations, the terpenes, the flavonoids, and the cannabinoids work at an intracellular level. They work at the level of PPAR and NF, KB, etc. Intracellular. A recent paper just published last week shows that cannabinoids can actually wake up dormant stem cells in wound beds. What does that tell you? That they have regenerative capacity. And this is really exciting, and this validates my results. That study, I posted it on social media as well. The fact that study showing that both CBD and THC can stimulate to life dormant
reactivating the
stem cells
that are inhibiting the.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, and that's why I'm observing the essentially regenerative effects. People come into my study with big gaping wounds, and at the end of the study, they're healed over. You shouldn't see that degree of regeneration. A 90-year-old with peripheral vascular disease and diabetes shouldn't be regenerating tissue.
I just careful what you wish for, because with the FDA, you don't want to even if you know it does more, you want to kind of get a foothold in just covering pain. So how do I explain this? When you submit a drug or even a device, it's worse. Oftentimes you know that it has a chemical effect, but you don't want to declare that to the FDA because you want to get the product approved. So you start with pain, or you start with a beachhead, and then you prove clinically the other points later, so that your product, you get more bang for your buck, if you will, into your claims. But I think now that pain's becoming front and center as a primary endpoint for the FDA, starting, it doesn't need to be a new drug entity. It's a known drug entity with clear pharmacokinetics that can be this 505(b)(2) process. Okay, and so I'm with you. I'm a big believer in what you're doing. So we're gonna stop for now, but we should chat sometime. I'd love to get together and talk more. And as I say, coming out of Gary's tutelage is pretty cool. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Sebald and known him for many, many years. So real pleasure meeting you, and thank you for joining us on the Fireside Chat.